Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome to this video, guys. This is a crash course teaching you guys or explaining to you guys how to understand the chapters of trade in Hanafi fiqh. My name is Liaquat. This is my channel YouTube. This is my YouTube channel, Roots of Knowledge. If you guys are not familiar with the channel, please hit the like, subscribe button and check out the videos. Share them with others so that we all get a share of the great reward. And let's carry on with this then. So as you guys know, I'm going through Quduri, and before I actually go through a major chapter, I like to have a little crash course so you guys understand in my own words what exactly this chapter is basically dealing with. So let's start with this then. So first of all, so this is the chapter of trade. Buyu, in Arabic you call it buyu. Okay, so buyu or bay, this is the Arabic name for it. Now, let's say, for example, like you are going to go and buy, I don't know, a car from someone. This is my version of a car. Okay, I like that nice car there. So you're going to buy this car of this individual. Now, what are the Islamic rules related to buying a car? This is what you're going to be learning in today's crash course, inshallah, and much more as well, not just that. So generally, for example, you're going to have cash with you, obviously. Let's say, for example, the car costs £5,000. And so you're going to give him the cash. He's going to give you the car and the deal is done. Yeah, that's normally how these things happen. So here, the issue over here is basically this. Islamically, this deal is actually called an exchange. And the definition of the exchange is very important, right? It's in Arabic, it's actually mubadalatu al-mali bil-mali bit-taradi. So this is something you need to remember, okay? Okay, taradi. So what does this exactly, what's the meaning of this? So mubadala means exchange. Mal means wealth. Yeah, for wealth. Bit-taradi, with mutual consent. Yeah, mutual. Two-sided consent. Any deal that takes place between any two human beings where wealth is exchanged from one side to the other. So for example, like over here, there's wealth and there's a car over here and they're exchanged on both sides. Anything like that, this will be counted as being a trade deal. So even if two people, I don't know, have, one guy says, you know what, you want to swap cars? Yeah, you keep my car, I keep your car. They don't use the word trade, it's still counted as being a trade. It's mubadalatul mali bil mali bit taradi. So this is very, very important for us to understand first of all. So let's first of all, let's try to I'm gonna move these guys to the side. This is the trade that's taking place between them. But we need to understand more about this definition, don't you think? Right, so I want to break down this definition for you guys in much more detail. So first of all, what is considered to be mal? What do we consider mal, right, or wealth? Islamically, what do we consider wealth? So there's two aspects to what kind of wealth it is. Number one, anything in the universe that people have interested in acquiring. Anything. So think of anything that you can. As long as people are interested in it, in Arabic, it fulfills the first criteria of mal. So it could be cash. It could be rocks, I don't know, some expensive rocks. It could be some special type of, I don't know, metal. It could be bricks, anything, a house, could be a car, so forth. Anything, think of anything, put in the comments as well. And number two, it must be halal, meaning it cannot be haram. It must be something that Allah has not called haram. So for example, that excludes, therefore, pigs. You can't sell pigs. You can't sell wine. Yeah, so wine and pigs cannot be mal. So if you were to actually trade pigs or wine, you went to the shop to buy a chocolate bar and you said to the guy, I'll give you some bacon, that trade will not be allowed. Right? So you're not allowed to use any of this for that. So this is what we call mal. Okay, so there's specific criteria. There are certain things in the world basically you are not allowed to use in your trade. Simple as that. So once we've understood this, now let's move on to the next aspect of this, which is the concept of mubadala. What does mubadala actually mean? Right, so let's get rid of this out of the way. Okay, so interest. People are interested in this. People consider this to be halal. It's not haram. Okay, number 2. The second aspect of this is mubadala. There has to be exchange taking place. So when we say exchange takes place, there are actually 4 types of trade when we talk about exchange. All right. Now, before we actually go into exchange, what we need to understand also is the concept of like transferal of ownership. Right. So transfer of property or ownership. So this can either be mutual, two-sided, or this can be versus one-sided. Yeah, unilateral. So bilateral and unilateral. So one-sided exchange, for example, someone gives you a gift. Someone comes to your house, they give you a nice box of chocolates, or they give you a watch, or they give you, I don't know, some flowers. This is a one-way transfer of ownership. Number 2 is if you, for example, like borrow something. So it's not really transfer of ownership, right? So I'll put this in brackets. But sometimes you might give something to someone, so to borrow, but this is not transfer of ownership. This is transfer of use, okay? Number 3 is inheritance. So inheritance. So for example, like let's say you inherit something from someone passes away in your family and you receive some of their property. There's only a one-way, there's like a one-way deal that has taken place, okay? Number 4, and this is not a transfer of ownership, this is a trust. So someone leaves some money with you, or they leave a watch with you, or they leave something valuable with you. So these 2 are not necessarily considered to be transfer of ownership, but it's just the other 2, gifting and inheritance. This is a one-way sort of like deal here. If there's anything else that comes to your mind, you can put it in the comments below. Okay, now let's go back to mutual then. So mutual is either through trade. Yeah, so it's either through trade, or number 2, it's through leasing. Yeah, to lease something, to hire, to lease, to rent out to someone. And these 2 are generally mentioned by the Muslim scholars as well. So now let's go back to mubadala then. So when we talk about mubadala, when we talk about exchange, this can either be, so let's actually get rid of this. Yeah, get rid of this and make some more space. This can either be done, number 1, cash versus cash, cash for cash. Okay, let's make this a bit bigger so you can see. Cash for cash. So what do we mean by cash for cash? So cash for cash is basically where you have, for example, like you're exchanging pounds for dollars. Yeah, pounds for dollars, or even pounds for pounds. This type of trade is known as a foreign exchange, forex. Yeah, forex, foreign exchange trade. There's rules regarding this that we're going to be covering in the book Quduri. How much cash can you trade for how much cash? Does the cash have to be of a certain type? Can you give £10 for £100? Are you allowed to do this? Okay, and this also goes into the realm of interest as well, right? So interest rulings also fall under this. Number 2, the second type is what we call goods for goods. Yeah, goods versus goods. So non-cash for non-cash. And it's just like, imagine someone was to give a car for a computer, a laptop. Yeah, an exchange of car for laptop. This would be considered to be goods for goods. There's no cash involved. This is known as barter. Okay, so bartering, right? So you got bartering taking place there. So in the bartering system, where goods, you call this muqayyada in Arabic. In Arabic it's called muqayyada. We're going to be covering this as well. There's also rules attached to this as well. Number 3, the third type is what we call cash versus goods. This is one that you normally do on a daily basis. You go to the shop to buy coffee, you might give cash, you might pay by card, or you go to, the shops to buy bread, or you even pay for a sofa. This is basically cash for goods. in today's times, this is the most common type of trade that we have. It's a common trade known as Bay' Mutlaq, and we're going to be discussing the rules regarding this as well. And fourthly, the fourth type is what we call forward sales. Forward sales are basically pre-ordering something. So you give the cash first, and then you get the order at a later date. In Arabic, there are two words that are used for this. One is salam, right? Transaction of salam. And the other one is what we call manufacturing istisna. So manufacture, right? So you order some sofas to be manufactured for you, or anything like that, clothing to be stitched for you. So these are four types of contracts that we are going to be dealing with when we talk about transactions. So you think about anything. Let's say for last week, where did you go last week? Where did you spend money last week? You went and you bought food from a restaurant. Yeah. So there's cash for goods. Okay. You might have gone and bought yourself a dessert. Right. Again, cash for goods. You might have gone and you might have exchanged money. You want to go for Umrah and you want to buy riyal. So you gave cash and then you got riyal. This is cash for cash. You might even have swapped some items with someone. You gave a book to someone and you took their book. Right. So this is goods for goods. So this is what you need to have in your mind when you're looking at any type of contract. Like over here, the cash, right, for the car is obviously cash for goods. So this is when it comes to mubadal, exchange, right? So exchange on the both sides has to occur, and it has to be, like we said, mutual. Remember we talked about the mutual? It has to be two-sided, right? Now, when it comes to the payment, right, the mal, there's an important thing that we need to understand, right? So there's actually four ways you can pay for this. So you can either pay for this. So if I was to make this, so how to pay. So you can either pay for this on your own, right? So you basically take the money out and you give it to the person, okay, like this gentleman over here is doing, or you can get someone else to pay. Someone else, like you might get a credit card company to pay for you, right? So you have a credit card company, or I don't know, someone else, you ask your friend to pay. So if someone else pays, there's three ways that this is normally done. Okay, so one is through what we call agency. Agency, where you ask someone else to buy the item for you and then you pay them back later. This is known as wakala. So we're going to be talking about, there's a chapter of wakala dedicated to the whole idea of, can you get someone else to go to the shops to buy you some, I don't know, fish and chips, right? If you're in England, you know what that means. Can you do that? Yes or no? So this is known as wakala. Or number two is where you actually, you get a guarantor, right? So someone who will guarantee that they will pay if you can't pay. You call this kafala. Kafala. So let's say, for example, you go to buy a house and the person says, look, I don't know if you can pay for it or not. And then you say, right, look, I've got this guy who's very wealthy. If I can't pay for it, he will definitely 100% pay for this. You call this kafala. And number three is you have something which is you transfer the payment to someone else. This is called hawala, right? So transferal of payment, transferal of debt to someone else, and you call this hawala. Again, so let's say, for example, I buy something off you, and then I say to my friend, you know, is it okay if you pay? Yeah, you go and sort it out. You pay for it, please. So this is separate from kafala. This is called hawala. So these are three types of ways of paying or getting the deal done. Wakala, and then you got kafala, and then you got hawala. Okay, so these are three ways that this type of contract is actually, the payment is actually made. Now, these two individuals, I haven't mentioned what their names are, have I? No, I haven't. So I need to mention what their names are. So this guy is known as the buyer. Okay, and this guy is known as the seller. Okay, or in Arabic, the terms are mushtari, and seller is bayi'. Okay, bayi' and mushtari. These are two types of people that you have who basically will do this deal for you, or will do the deal transaction. Now, one of the things that we have to always understand is the buying and the selling that takes place. This has to be something which is, done in a manner that is permissible. So that's why all of this, all of what we do is actually governed by the Islamic courts. So the Islamic courts are there to stop people from being ripped off. Okay, so Islamic courts, yeah, these are like, is it Ofcom, where you have an external board, a body that will actually make sure that people get their due rights, because we don't want people to be ripped off. Okay, so now I want to actually talk a little bit about this idea of taradi. Okay, so taradi. We're going to come back to this idea of exchange in a bit, but I want to talk about this idea of taradi. Taradi basically means mutual consent. Okay, so taradi, mutual consent. So anything that you buy, both parties have to be happy that they are exchanging the item. They are selling the item basically. If the two parties are not happy, right, then that sale will not go through. Remember that, it will not go through. This is why Islamically there are certain measures put in place. There are certain devices that will help people from being ripped off or from buying something that they are not happy to buy. So the Sharia has given three things. Number one is a 3-day right to choice. So basically you have 3 days, yeah, to make a choice, to decide whether you want the item or not, right? So you take the item, you have 3 days, you test it out, you inspect it, and if you're not happy with it, you can give it back, get your money back, full refund, and that's it, right? So this is the way that, you know, people are able to be confident in buying something and making sure that it's the thing that they want. Number two is you have the right of inspection. You buy something, you take it home, you open the box, you find out it's not the thing that you wanted, it doesn't fit the description that you were promised, you have the right to give it back because there's no mutual consent. And number three is if you buy something, you have the right for the item to be sound and not damaged. So anything that has a fault in there, you have the right, any manufacturing fault, any fault that came from the seller, then you have the right to give it back, give the item back, right? It's because you weren't happy. Mutual consent has not been found, right? So this is a very important thing as well. Anything that you buy, you have the right for this. And these three are separate chapters in Quduri, right? The idea of having a limited number of days where you can inspect something, you can check something. Are you happy with it? Are you not? And if you're not, you give it back. And number two is you look at the item. Does it fit the criteria that you wanted? Does it not fit the criteria? Again, you have the right to give it back. And does it have a fault in there? Does it have something that has reduced the value because it has a crack in there, or it has a damaged discoloring in there, or something of that nature? Then you have the right to give it back. So these are all measures that are put in place to save people from being ripped off, conned, okay, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so now when it comes to the types of trade that you do, so any trade that fulfills these conditions, meaning, what do I mean by this? I mean any trade that is mubadala with mal, like over here, this guy gives the £5,000, bil mal, with mal, which is the car here, bit taradi, and both sides are happy. This trade is considered to be a done and dusted trade. Yeah. So what they generally say is that each party or one of the two sides has to give what we call an offer, and the other side has to accept the offer. Yeah. In order for this to be a fair trade, there needs to be an offer and acceptance on both sides. If there's an offer, if someone offers to sell their car, but you don't accept it, then obviously the deal has not been done. But once offer and acceptance has been done, once this has been solidified and done, you cannot break that contract unless one of these measures occurs, right? So 3 days inspection, 3 days testing, inspection, and faults. Yeah. Otherwise, you can't like give the cash, take the car, and then come back to him and say, no, I want my cash back, or I want my car back. You can't do that at all. This is impermissible, right? Because this is breaking the rules of trade. So what you can actually do if you want to retract, if you want to nullify the contract, you can do what is known as a mutual nullification. Yeah. So mutual nullification of the contract is something which is permissible. So nullification. This in Arabic is called iqala. Iqala, where you basically two guys, let's say you buy something, then you go back to the person and say, I'm sorry, look, I didn't really want to buy this. I just don't know what came into my mind. Is it okay if I give it back? And they say, yeah, it's fine, give it back. This is allowed because it's on both sides. Both sides are happy to exchange the item. There's actually a chapter that is dedicated to how we nullify a contract, right? How we mutually nullify a contract. This is going to be called iqala, and that's where we're going to be discussing this. Okay. Now, we're almost finished, right? There's just a few more things, because when I was designing this, I was thinking to myself, what shall I mention to these guys? What shall I not mention to these guys? You know, subhanallah, it's just something which sort of like, you know, because I enjoy teaching this subject, and it's something which I generally teach nearly every year. And I really hear people saying to me that they find the chapters of trade. If you guys find the chapters of trade hard, you let me know. If you think this is a hard chapter and you find it normally difficult to study, put it in the comments. But I love this chapter. I love explaining this as well. Okay, so let's go back to this cash for cash, goods for goods. Now, in cash for cash, when we're dealing with cash for cash, one of the problems that we have is, and goods for goods, is that this can go into the realm of what we call riba. Right? Riba is a form of interest. So there's two types of forms of interest that we're going to be dealing with. We're going to be dealing with what we call deferred interest, credit interest, where you charge people for money you borrow them. So you borrow them money and then you put a charge on there, you put an interest charge on there. And then the second type is where you have interest, surplus interest, where you basically sell someone and on one side there's inequality. For example, you sell £10 for £20. So £10 versus £20, this is unfair because on one side there's more and the other side there's less. So there's two types of interest that we're going to be looking at. The common interest that you people hear about, which is interest in the banks or interest in student loans, that is actually what we call credit interest. Right? That's credit interest, where you pay, the longer you keep the money, the more you have to pay. And surplus interest is where you have exchange of two types of goods, and one side is exactly the same item and one side is actually more there. There's actually a separate chapter dedicated to surplus, what we call surplus riba, surplus interest, and that's something that we're going to be talking about in a lot of detail. Okay. All right. Now, when it comes to cash for cash, okay, let's do this cash for cash over here. Let's bring this over here. So when it comes to cash for cash, there's actually a type of deal. There's three types of deals that we're going to be looking at. So we look at a normal trade that you do in the shops. Number one, like a normal, you buy a car for cash, you buy a mobile for cash, you buy, food for cash, right? That's a normal trade. Number two is what we call a cost price. Yeah. So basically you sell the item for whatever you got it for, right? So this is actually the dedicated chapter to this called Tawliya, which we're going to do. And it's basically where you bought something for £100 and you sell it for £100. You make no profit at all. And number three is what you call cost plus. Cost plus is where you actually put an extra profit on top. Like you explicitly say to this buyer, the one that's buying the thing from you, that look, you say to them, I bought it for £100, but I want to make £10 profit on top. So this is actually known as murabaha. Okay, this is called cost plus. And this is something which you probably heard in Islamic financial institutes. They have a product where they call it murabaha product. Like for example, let's say you want to buy a house. They will buy the house for you for the price, and then you buy it off them for the same price with some profit on top. Okay, so let's say the house costs, I don't know, £200,000. They buy the house and then you pay them £200,000 plus the profit on top, which let's say it's, I don't know, £20,000 on top. They make £20,000 from it. Okay, so these are three types of trades which are very important to understand, which we're going to be covering as well. Normal, cost price, cost plus, goods for goods. And we're also going to be dealing with salam and manufacturing, which is known as istisna. in a lot of detail. Okay, salam is basically what we talk about when we talk about ordering something. You want to order a whole, 1 ton of potatoes for the 1st of December. So what you do is you put in an order, you put the payment down, and then you wait for your order to come, and then you pick it up on that particular date. All right, so this is known as salam. Finally, the last thing that we're going to be looking at, okay, the last thing that we're going to look at is any trade that fulfills these criteria. Any trade that fulfills this criteria, right, is what we call a bay' sahih, is a valid contract, right? So any mubadala, mal, bil mal, bit taradi, any trade that fulfills these conditions, you call it a sahih trade. So the last time you went to the shops and you bought yourself a drink or a chocolate bar or crisps, you actually done a sahih trade because you exchanged halal goods for halal goods and both were happy. However, if any part of these 4 is missing, right, any part is missing, you call it a batil trade. Right? A batil, which means an invalid trade. An invalid trade. So let's say you went to the shops and you gave a bottle of wine in exchange for, a mobile phone. That would not be allowed. That is an invalid trade because it has a haram thing. There's a haram thing involved. So the criteria of the definition is not fulfilled. So you call this batil. It does not happen. It's not even a trade. And then there is a third type of trade. So this third type of trade is something Hanafis are unique in. This is called a Farsid trade, which you call a defective trade. Defective. Okay, defective trade. A Farsid. What's a Farsid trade? A Farsid trade is basically anything that fulfills all of this criteria, but an external factor has rendered the contract defective. So it goes through, but it's sinful contract. It should be broken, but it is actually a contract. So for example, I'll give you one example. Let's say this guy who bought the car, the seller says to him, that I will only sell you the car on the condition that I can drive every Saturday. You have to let me drive the car on Saturday. So the definition mubadala, mal bil mal bit taradi has occurred, but there's an extra condition. This extra condition is unfair. It's an unfair condition, and so it renders the trade to be problematic. Okay, so this is why it's sinful trade, but it does go through. So this is the strange thing, it does go through. And that's it basically. Now, the whole concept of trade in the Hanafi fiqh is the idea that we don't want people to argue and fight. Anything in a trade which is going to most likely result in arguing and fighting is something which the Hanafis say will render the contract fasid. Right? And there's types of contracts the Prophet ﷺ has actually forbade. Right? Some contracts which contain what we call excessive. There is excessive uncertainty. So any contract that contains excessive uncertainty, meaning you don't know what you're going to get. You bought this big massive box of something, mystery box, and you don't know what's inside of it. This is actually not allowed. If it's going to cause argument and fighting and people to, then this is considered to be impermissible. But if it's not, then it's fine. So this is basically what the whole concept of bay is all about. Just to kind of summarize what things are impermissible in trade. There's actually riba interest is impermissible. Number 2 is gambling is impermissible. So gambling does not fall under trade, even though there might be 2 sides. And number 3 is excessive uncertainty. Excessive uncertainty. These are 3 things that a trade must be void and empty of. And that's it, guys. This is the crash course of bay. I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is what we're going to be covering. I'll just quickly go over what we did today. So over here, we talked about buyu, which is trade. And we said that there's a buyer and there's a seller. The buyer and the seller, one of them gives an offer, the other one gives an acceptance, cash for a car. And we said that there is a definition that has to be fulfilled. Mubadalatul mali bil mali bit taradi. The mubadala is consisting of cash for cash sales, goods for goods sales, cash for goods sales, and forward sales. And we gave examples of each one. And then we said transfer of property can occur in two ways: gifting and inheritance. Borrowing is not transfer of, although it is a form of transfer, and trust is also the same. And the mutual two-sided transfer is either in the form of trade or leasing. Both are going to be covered in the whole section. What is mal? We said people have to be interested in it, and it has to be halal. You can't have haram mal. How do you pay? You can either pay on your own, or you can get someone else to pay through agency, guaranteeing, or transfer of debt. What kind of measures have been put in place to stop people from being ripped off and conned? Taradi, which is mutual consent, so 3 days testing, inspection, and finding a fault can give it back. What are the different types of trade? Once the trade is done, it's either sahih. If it's missing something in the definition, it's batil. And if it's full definition but something external has caused it problem, it's defective. And that's it, guys. So let me know in the comments what you guys think of this, if it's made sense to you guys. It's just an overview, remember, of how the trades work. And hopefully once we go into each chapter, you're going to enjoy the chapters, inshallah. Jazakallah khair to all my patrons for all the support, all the monthly donations you guys give for my channel. Thank you. It means a lot to me, honestly. If any of you guys think that the work I do is something that you guys enjoy and you want to support my channel, then you can become monthly donors. Any amount you can give, it's something which will very, very helpful towards my channel, and I'm really appreciative of it. And that's it, guys. So jazakumullah khair. Details are in the description below, and I will see you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.